So I've done a lot of international work. What I wanted to share with you, and I was going to be brief anyway because I want to have a chat and a discussion. And I've done international work in different contexts. So the first kind of bucket of work was after I graduated from college, I worked for an international non-governmental organization, or NGO, and I taught in a rural Black school in South Africa. And then I actually, in partnership with a local nonprofit in South Africa, I worked for a US NGO called the National Democratic Institute. We ran voter education programs for South Africa's first democratic elections. And really, that was my first experience in sort of structuring an international partnership. I was not the one who structured it. I was a 23-year-old, program officer on the ground trying to implement the work. What was interesting about the dynamic at the time, actually, it's quite apropos to the moment that we're in now, really interesting interpersonal dynamics between a US NGO and a South African partner, really interesting and challenging racial dynamics. I was the only, we had a full complement of local South Africans working on it. My colleague was African American, and I was the only sort of white American working on the project. And there were tons of racial dynamics at that moment that made, during the run up to the South African election, which made, the interpersonal work really challenging, and happy to talk about that experience. But that was a really formative experience early in my career. I spent 3 years in South Africa. I came back to the US and went to business school and have a master's in international affairs. The next kind of piece of international collaboration work that I did was I was a director of international business development for America Online, AOL. Only Steve's old enough to have used it, at least who I can see on this call. Dial-up internet. So we did a joint venture partnership in China with a company that was then called Legend, that's now called Lenovo. Really interesting, and we can talk about it during the Q&A. Kind of how do you structure partnerships and joint ventures that work for both organizations? I think one of the most interesting dynamics was that oftentimes the interest of the joint venture is not necessarily well aligned with the interest of the two companies coming together in the partnership. And I can talk about that in more detail. We announced a $100 million joint venture. We actually never launched the business, just given what was happening with the dynamics of AOL at the time, as we were in the internet kind of bubble bursting. The next set of partnerships that I wanted to talk about was when I set up my a venture capital fund with a partner in Israel. That was very interesting. I don't know how many of you in this group have ever done any work in Israel. I had actually done a little bit of work when I was at AOL. We had acquired a company, again, Steve, you might be the only person old enough to remember, called ICQ, which was a very early messaging company. We acquired them, I don't know, for a couple $100 million. I was trying to kind of work with the Israeli team at AOL, and I met with them, and I was like, oh, we should do all these things. And they told me no. And I went back to the guy I worked for at AOL. I was like, did we buy them or did they buy us? The Israelis can often be quite opinionated and challenging to get work done. But then I decided to actually partner with an Israeli in a new venture fund called Bridge. We invested in early stage medical devices, and happy to talk about doing international venture capital, investing in Israeli deals, trying to do due diligence on Israeli companies, sort of sitting in Cleveland. So that was the next phase of my international partnerships. And then the bucket, which I'll mention, and this is kind of my current bucket of things, when I joined the university in a full-time role. I think many of you are familiar because I talk about it all the time. I launched a MOOC, a massive open online course that was actually based on some work that I did in Vietnam. I was a Fulbright scholar in Vietnam, Fulbright, for those that are not aware of that program, is a U.S. government kind of educational exchange. It sends U.S. Professors and students, and actually professionals, for any of you who are interested in a different kind of Fulbright, something called the Fulbright Specialist Program. And I was based at a business school in Hanoi, did some work kind of out of that for the Vietnamese government, and then I launched this MOOC. So I've been doing a lot of work associated with that course and through partnerships. And actually, this is a really interesting moment to partner internationally, because as we all are sitting in our various offices or homes or parents' houses, there's a lot that we can do. So I'm happy to talk about that bucket of work, because it's ongoing. I just posted something on Facebook this morning about a new collaboration I'm doing in South Africa. So, okay. So that I'm going to go to questions. I see Steve has asked one in the chat about mitigating cultural differences. And maybe I'll talk for a second, Steve, and I'd love for you to unmute and share your perspectives as well. And obviously I can see Nolan on here. And again, for others, it looks like we have about 7. Please feel free to jump in with your own perspectives on this as well. But let me answer the question that Steve posted in the chat, and then encourage Steve and Nolan, if you wanted to, or anybody else, to jump in. I mean, cultural differences, particularly when you navigate across multiple markets, when you, my South Africa experience, because I lived and worked there for 3 years, that was my deepest experience and deepest understanding of a market and a culture and language. I mean, one little party trick that has actually served me well, just doing work across markets, is learning at least like 10 words of a local language. It actually can get you far. So if I'm giving a talk, obviously in the context when I was living there, spend a half an hour learning hello, thank you, enough that people are like, oh, this person made an effort to at least learn a couple words of my local language. On the cultural differences piece, I know when I moved to South Africa, there was a book I got called basically it was like culture shock or something. They do it for different countries. And I think for those of us that have done work overseas, it often is, and I don't know who, again, I can't see who's on this, but if you're an international student that is studying and working in the US, we've all felt this, it's really hard, and oftentimes it's shopping in the grocery store, the way you pay for something. So I think those moments, which to me are the most valuable to do international work, are often the most jarring. I mean, Steve, you had asked about even using international agents. When I did my China work, we did hire a local consulting firm to kind of help us navigate. It was funny. I just got a LinkedIn request message from the consulting firm that we used in China. It turns out this is an American who went to Yale. He now he's head of public policy at Dropbox, of all places. So they really did help us. I don't know, Steve, do you want to unmute and maybe share a couple of your own insights on this? Because I'm sure you probably have many.
No, I have done quite a bit of international business, and and I agree to your points. Is you try to take into consideration. I always read the books about the country I'm going into. There are all kinds of tips and things like that on, don't shake with your right hand, don't point, don't, all these things that, sometimes as an American, you come in and you're just so overbearing, right? We kind of roll in the countries like you just can't believe, and when I was at Intel particularly, I'm particularly conscious right now. I'm working with Japan. And that is a mindset and a cultural of respect and consensus and deliberateness that drives me absolutely bonkers. Okay? When I was at Intel and I ran a global group, my boss did all the Japanese meetings and I did everything that was China, I did the rest of the world. He did Japan, because Japan, you just had to sit there for these 8-hour dinners, drinking and nodding your head. And he had the patience to do it. God bless him. Like, I could deal with Israelis. They would scream at me. I'd scream back. Not a problem. In China, the same thing. They scream, I scream. Koreans, no problem. But sitting in a Japanese meeting was torture for me. And it never worked out. So I stopped doing it. And now I find myself, here I am. My 2 biggest partners I'm working with right now are in Japan. And I'm like, oh my God, worst thing in the world could happen to me. So
I'm curious, like, on that point, given the moment we're in, and there's obviously tons of articles about this, like, is how much of international business is going to be this, like, my sense is you're probably not getting on a plane anytime soon to go to Japan, and I've been in those situations as well in Japan, China, Korea, many places where, like, this whole, your job is often kind of going out, as you say, in these very uncomfortable long meetings. Like, what's your sense, Steve? And, like, is this moment, are we see a point where we're not doing, things are going to change and we're not only not getting on planes in the next few months, but maybe we do business differently because of this crisis?
There are 2 things that my observation, I've made this comment before, is people are figuring out how to do things virtually.
Yeah.
Right. Not having doing the face-to-face meetings. So that takes a whole level of salespeople, international travelers that aren't doing it anymore, consultants that normally hop planes, do it face-to-face, and realize, like, I'm still billing, still doing it. I'm still selling. Deals are happening. And so I just wonder what's going to happen to that as this becomes more the norm. I'm in a conversation right now with Taiwan, and we're trying to figure out how to get there. Because I think it would just help get through some of this language barrier that we have to have it. But it's 14-day quarantine when you get there. And I said, look, if you want, I'll do it. But that means I fly there, sit in a hotel for 14 days. We have 2 to 3 days worth of meetings. Then I fly back, sit in a hotel for 14 more days because I quarantine coming back. So that's 1 month of my life I will be uncomfortable. And I'm on, for the right deal, I'll do it.
I was gonna say, you better want that deal.
You better want it. But it's like, wow, what a sacrifice. The interesting thing is with Japan, they do not have a work from home culture, period. They all go to work. It's who can put the most hours in the office, right? That's their culture. So when we started transitioning to doing these kind of conference calls, engineering ones, group meetings that are on Zoom, a lot of them didn't have notebooks. Or when they go home, I remember one engineer, he's sitting, I'm looking around, I go, where are you doing this call? He goes, I'm in my bathroom. My apartment is very small. My wife and 2 kids are out there doing online learning. It's tiny, their houses. He's in the bathroom, literally. I'm seeing shampoo bottles, etc. He's doing a conference call. And so, just taking that consideration internationally, that we have it pretty well here. We have good good internet speed. Most of us have larger spaces, and you can get things done. But a lot of places don't, and it's a shame. And look, I'm trying to figure it out as anybody. I came here hoping you'd have some great news for me. Like, here's how we do it. Here's the magic sauce. But
Nolan, what about any thoughts? I don't know. Have you done any work or studied overseas during your short career?
Yeah, it was my junior year of undergrad, which is 2 years ago now. I'm thinking about it. I went to Hungary. I got the invite from Worcester, and they're saying, hey, we have this program from the University of Pêche Sports Medicine Center. It's a physiotherapy company, and they wanted to split apart. And they said, all right, you're going over there. You're going to be working with a team. I worked with an international team, which was really cool. And one of the things that I figured out really quickly was a communication barrier. So it was before each meeting, we would just talk for a half an hour, just about how we were doing, what's the plan, what's the objective. We come to lunch, we talk about what we learned, what's our goal. And we just do so many of these little conversations that we always kept on point. Because originally we would all it was just very difficult just to sit down and figure out everything that was happening. But then as soon as we learned to communicate, we learned all the time to just keep connections open, just always working with each other. And at that point, it became really easy. So it was a really cool experience, though. I got to work with a couple students from Botswana and a student from Japan on my team. So it was really cool.
Did you find, Nolan, that English was the predominant language for business?
Yeah, surprisingly, yeah. I didn't even realize it myself until so to get there, I went through like Icelandic Air, and then I hopped over to like all Scandinavian, and from there I hopped to Belarus, and then from there to Hungary. And I learned that if pretty much every single international travel, it's always English to English.
Yeah.
Go. So you could be going from Finland to Sweden, for example, and the language is English. So it was really interesting to discover, like, there was always some, like, pilot or some, like, attendant that knows English. So English became really, like, the business language of even travel. And English was the business language of even connections and contacts over there. So it was really interesting of an experience.
I find that when I do have international calls, that following the call immediately, I send a transcript or my notes to everybody saying, hey, this is what I heard. Boom, 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 just bullet points right down the call. And I fill notebooks up now when I'm on these meetings, and I quickly flip it back into English, and so they can make sure I heard what I thought they said and put it in writing. So they gives them also, because a lot of them can read it and they understand it or they get it translated, but that's always very helpful.
Right. That's why we always do like
in the
constant
US.
meetings.
Yeah, well, that's true too. Have you been to the South? I mean,
yeah, right.
Oh gosh.
Did you have a question for us, Nolan? And I know it's hard to, I know it looks like, although I can't see, I think there's a couple other people on. Obviously feel free to just put your question in the chat. But Nolan, did you have a question or a thought, or a deep thought, or a shallow thought?
Not particularly. I was just, I guess, like, as you guys were talking and conversing, I was just kind of thinking like how COVID's been impacting everything, and just like, I don't have an estimation like when things are going to officially like reset back to normal, but I was curious if you guys had some sort of estimation on that, of when like we're not going to have to go through the 14-day system, and then you're only going to be there for 2-3 days and flying back in quarantine for 14 days. Is there like any progression of like an expedient system at this point, or is it still delayed like this?
I mean, to me, like, among the insanity of this period is like, the U.S. are usually the leaders, right? In these, it's like the fact that Europe is banning travel of Americans.
Right.
I mean, without kind of getting into how we got here and why we got here politically from a leadership perspective, like, I mean, to me, I mean, everything about this is jarring and shocking, but like, and this actually was interesting. We, and I guess you weren't part of it. I lead, for your benefit, a trip. I do the international travel course for Weatherhead. So we were planning on going to Colombia. So a couple of the first years, like Katie Van Duzen and a few of your classmates, Nolan, were signed up. So we had about 25 people. And we were like about to, I mean, basically all the COVID stuff, this was early March. So I get a call. I was actually traveling. It was my last trip. I get a call from our international affairs. They were like, all international trips were canceled. Right. And at the time when these things first started getting canceled, it was like, what? Like, there's no COVID in Colombia. It felt, in hindsight, it was, of course, the really appropriate decision, but it felt like, it was jarring. Right. And interestingly, then as the week, like, it progressed, we're like, oh, it's such a bummer. Even at that moment, and Colombia now, I mean, a lot of these countries have their own issues. Like, people wouldn't have wanted to meet with us because we were Americans. Like, and it was like, again, we have so often been the leader. It's Americans making decisions not to go to some place because of crime or some other, and now it's like people don't want to let us come. And, if we continue to, have this situation that we have here, you know, this may continue. I mean, there's issues in the world. I mean, I don't know, Steve, what you.
I will just tell you my business plan right now is there will be no travel this year, and travel in 2021 completely unlikely. I can the only thing that I will gauge off of, and I don't care about, you know, all the other things, is that there's a vaccine and that there's comfort level for me to send somebody out or for myself to go travel. I am fully prepared. We have stockpiled cash. We're doing everything we can. If you came to my factory right now, you'd be in awe. I don't have any group spaces anymore. I don't have a kitchen anymore. We broke it all down. It's done. My conference room is gone and I don't anticipate putting it up till they. Look, let's hope vaccines start coming out next year, and then but you still need to inoculate 7 billion people. So, you know, get the 50-50 now to be comfortable on that stuff. So my head for my company is 2022. I think the rest of 20 is a wash. I think 21 is, and I'm horrified by it. I'm a rising senior in high school who's going to go to college next year, and I don't know what that's going to look like. Because you know what? We can't even do any college tours.
I know, it's funny. I'm a rising senior. We're driving tomorrow to Ithaca just to walk around Cornell's empty campus, just to go.
Yeah, she wants to go in South Carolina, but it's a hot spot. I don't want to drive to South Carolina. Like, she wants to go walk around Clemson and Elon, go to North Carolina, Elon. I'm like, all right, let's go. We'll walk around an empty campus, and I'll do it. Yeah. But how do you find your people, right? You need it. I'm worried about it a lot. I am. But just Nolan, I'm telling you, this year's a wash. Nothing. We're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Next year, it's going to be wholly dependent on the vaccine and how quickly that can get out.
Yeah. I mean, even for our like international set trip course, like it literally occurred. So we postponed it, right? We're like, oh, we'll go to Colombia next year, and actually a few of your like Natasha and Katie, those a few first years, we're like, oh, we'll just go. And like it occurred to me last week, I'm like, you know what? Probably not. Like, you know, I mean, so, and again, it's not. I mean, obviously, the theme of our little chat here is international. I mean, it's gonna. I totally agree with you, Steve. It's like, you know. It's going to be different. And I do think, you know, as we have an optimistic tone to end this, if we can at all, in all this mess. I mean, like even getting back to your first comment about doing business with Japan, or even like your partners in Taiwan, I think so many of us, and Steve, I assume we're aligned here. We're like, when you come out of the Intels or the AOLs and the Microsofts, like, and you see the importance of like, being in you know, business gets done because you show up in Korea, Japan, Budapest, whatever, and you break bread and have you know, all these things. And now it's like, that's just not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
And we're still going to want to and need to do business together. So we're going to have to do it differently.
And look, and I'll leave you this and go, business is happening.
Yeah,
it's happening. Deals are getting done. Yeah. It's just taking. Yeah. There's just so much more friction to getting it done, and you got to go in with your eyes wide open, going, "God, normally I'd get that done in a month. It's going to take 6."
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so much friction in the system, and so it's just dealing with that. I mean, look, and I'm optimistic by nature, but I'm telling you, you got to plan for the worst. And look, any upside happen is good. I mean, that's great. I hope it goes away faster. I mean, that'd be wonderful, right?
Yeah.
But I'm planning for the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, enjoyed it. So it's nice to see Steve, you and Nolan, and whoever the other 3 are. I think we now click over to networking.
Yes.
And see you guys soon.
Yeah.
Over Zoom or whatever we do.
Thank you so much.
That was fun.